Our next speaker for the day is going to be David Bolton. Ladies and gentlemen, he graduated from the University of Chester with a degree in physical education and English. He is the principal of Durham British Grammar School and Sarah Willett School. He has seen many significant changes during the time he has worked for ISG International Schools Group, with a huge increase in students' number and major structural developments around the school. Let's go ahead, hear from him more. A very warm welcome to you, David.
Good afternoon. My name is David Bolton, hailing from Liverpool in the UK, and I am very proud and privileged to be the principal at the British School Dhahran, part of the International Schools Group based here in the Eastern Province of Saudi Arabia, a country I have been pleased to call my home for the last 16 years. It's a real honour to be presenting here to you today at the 2021 summit. Coming obviously from the education sector, I'm going to focus my talk on the lessons learned from the virtual school experience, which was thrust on us so unexpectedly back in March 2020, and which could have an impact on the educational journey of our students for many years to come, if not for the rest of their lives. I'd like to begin by talking through the journey towards beginning virtual school. It's not just something we adopted in response to the COVID pandemic. We had been preparing for many years in anticipation of something happening. I arrived in Saudi back in August 2006. It was a very different place to the Saudi we find ourselves in today. I remember Dammam Airport as very different to the efficient place it is now. One of the fastest airports, in my opinion, to transit through. Technology in this country has made such great advances. How easy it is now to renew an exit entry visa, which may have taken weeks previously, and how quickly we can gain access to hospitals for treatment through the simple use of the Iqama number. Alongside this, it's also simple to be able to pay traffic fines for those who tend to drive a little faster than we should on the roads. The advances have been extraordinary. I, for one, also love the security of the banking system, as I can see immediately when money has left my account. It is very reassuring. However, in the educational world, we did not move so swiftly with technology. Back in 2006, I arrived at the school to find it resourced with quite simple, basic overhead whiteboard projectors linked to laptops, which restricted technological use in the classroom. It was inefficient and clumsy. I'd arrived from a school in the UK which was using interactive whiteboards, mobile laptop trolleys, having regular technology conferences, and was always updating hardware and software. However, one thing that my organization, the International Schools Group, was really ahead of the game with was virtual school preparation. Due to the problems suffered in education caused by the 2003 terror attacks, a very forward-thinking board of trustees had introduced the virtual school day as an essential component of each school calendar year, just in case a similar event or something else occurred. And as we found out in March 2020, the just in case became a reality. The initial virtual school idea would involve students working from home on a given day, usually early September. We began by using platforms such as Blackboard and Moodle, which we eventually discovered in practice did not meet the needs of either the student or the teacher, or the parents. They were cumbersome, and it took a significant amount of work to set things up online for students to work on. Activities were mostly asynchronous. With it only being one day, the need to bring in some form of synchronous work with the teacher was not really required. Bandwidth at the time was also causing problems. However, another outbreak of a different flu, bird or swine, around 2010-11, closed schools for a longer period of time across the kingdom, and we realized as educators that we had to adapt the model. Around 2014, as an organization, we made a shift to Google, which suddenly became our platform for all things within the school, including virtual aspects. We used Google as our main communication tool. We became skilled in using docs and sheets as collaborative tools to get the best from our students. Suddenly, the way we could set work from outside the school environment changed. As teachers, we were able to assign collaborative group work with students working together on projects and tasks as a team, sharing ideas with one another. Students were able to utilize and edit the same document so that their views could easily be seen. This was a complete change, an innovative one, that allowed us to encourage students to use their individual skills in a much better and clearer way. We developed a BYOD policy, bring your own device, into the school to actively encourage students to use devices to enhance their learning within the school environment. Added to this, the improved development of Google Classroom as a virtual tool, and we found ourselves developing the introductory mechanisms and strategies for the beginning of virtual teaching in the pandemic, March 2020. Our teachers at ISG are constantly encouraged to develop their skills with Google through attendance at summits across the world, both physically and virtually, and then to share good practice with colleagues back in the workplace. Here at ISG, with the development of ourselves as a Google school, we hosted 2 summits for educators within ISG schools and from across the local community. The training and development in the use of the Google platform was considered a high priority in our organization. Soon, we found many of the staff not just attending workshops at a Google Summit, but also having the expertise to deliver and facilitate sessions of their own, and many of our teachers have since gained certification at level 1 and 2. Utilizing the Google platform, we were also able to make the curriculum and the expectations of tasks and scheduling much more transparent for students and parents. It's also become much easier to access and to allow a clear dialogue between all concerned in the education of our students. With the development of the technological work and the change it made to the way we were delivering education to students, it became clear that we needed to adapt our mission statement to reflect this. So everything was more in line with what we were hoping to achieve. We did not want the mission statement to be just words. We wanted it to be something that we lived by. After many months of work, we came up with the statement, "We inspire innovation and compassionate action." We wanted our students and teachers to challenge themselves constantly, cross boundaries, look for new strategies and ideas, engage in effective research, as well as developing into excellent global citizens with a care for humanity. Inside the idea of our mission, we developed a fundamental system goal of learner agency, which was aimed at encouraging students to become more self-initiated, to be driven by their own interests, to know what works best for them, and to have their own voice and choice in how they learn. The fundamentals of this goal in both teachers and students was essential in developing the effective virtual model we are still using in school today. So now jump forward to March 2020. News develops of the new strain of a flu called COVID. As usual, we read about it daily, but we are still surprised by the speed with which it causes closures and lockdowns across the world. Suddenly, we find ourselves as educators knowing that we have prepared for this for years, but now it's time to put it into practice. It begins well, as we find ourselves well ahead of other countries, as we have been really well prepared. We can get straight on with what's required and keep students on track with the requirements of the curriculum. My daughter, working in a school in the UK, has to spend 6 to 8 weeks preparing her students to actually begin the virtual experience, whereas we can utilize it effectively, immediately. We find that Google Meet is the most suitable tool for synchronous teaching, and we increase the internet bandwidth at the school to allow for better connections and to stop meetings from dropping. Google Meet allows teachers to monitor who is online and attending classes regularly. It also allows for breakout rooms for students to work in smaller groups collaboratively, and they are able to report back to the whole class. The teacher is also able to provide individual one-to-one support for those requesting it. However, it soon becomes apparent that we cannot keep this routine going with students as the length of the virtual experience increases. We have to adapt, we have to review and change constantly. We have to maintain the interest of the students in the virtual school experience. It is noticeable that some students begin to disconnect from activities as they begin to find things mundane and not challenging. So we have to be innovative and look for new ways to motivate and encourage participation. We begin to embrace new technologies and platforms such as Edpuzzle, Pear Deck, Flipgrid, Seesaw. These platforms allow innovation in how students engage with content. The teachers are able to flip the lessons. Students learn content at home and demonstrate knowledge and mastery in the online classroom experience through activities based on the content learned at home. Parents are invited into the classroom experience, which makes our curriculum much more open and transparent. Alongside the technological element, we also needed to remember compassion for our students, living the virtual life alongside our parents and our teachers. It's a really difficult time. Our organization is the co-founder of the Global Compassion Summit. It is based on promoting and cultivating the principle of compassion and a compassionate way of life, so that it characterizes all of human society and all relationships. It's an opportunity for students around the world to meet, engage, and discuss action plans, solve local and global issues, and to try and make the world a much better place. In terms of a response to the pandemic, one of the key ways we demonstrated compassion to students was by being more increasingly flexible and empathetic. We realized that we needed to give the students extended deadlines, screen time limitations, to encourage exercise and increase the time dedicated to social and emotional learning. It became very important as the months went by to keep students and families at the school engaged in activities that would maintain connection to the school. So in terms of best practice, we have realized that with fundamental computer and internet literacy skills, students as young as 7 and 8 can study independently and at their own pace and begin to show the development of their own agency as they move through online activities. A student can go back to what a teacher has said by rewatching videos posted. This reinforcement helps them to gain a greater grasp of the content and may be something that is not possible in the physical classroom. This has been commented on by many of our students in surveys, that the ability to go back over work in their own time helped them to establish a greater understanding of the material being taught. The virtual school experience has taught teachers that it is a tool they will most probably continue to utilize when the physical experience returns for all students. Meeting, collaborating, virtual conversations, virtual summer school, virtual training sessions have improved our communications with the whole school community and have made things much more transparent. It has revolutionized communication between teachers, parents, and students, and most importantly, has made parents feel much more part of the school community. Based on our experiences, we will now continue with virtual parent-teacher conferences, with virtual professional development, and the use of virtual consultants. The virtual world has allowed our schools to have visits from modern-day authors, historians, scientists, geologists, and many more, which would not have been possible in physical teaching. This has helped the students to live the curriculum through real life experiences. Alongside this, interactive games, instant communication, access to class notes, and other media content has made everything more easily and readily available to students through the use of technology. Students that miss school can join the rest of the class through an online video and even participate with questions. We have many of our students who have said that the virtual school experience is preferable to the physical teaching. We need to learn from the experience and transform the Victorian model of education to cater for the new educational world based on the knowledge we have learned during the COVID pandemic. It would be a huge mistake to carry on as we were before March 2020, not taking into account the feedback we have received from students, parents, and teachers who may not have thrived in a physical classroom have become much more prominent in the virtual world. We must not ignore this information, but instead act upon it. Technology has transformed and will continue to transform education. There's immense potential in new ways to make learning more efficient and successful for our younger generation. And these well-educated students will become the innovators of the future. The International Schools Group here in Saudi Arabia has been at the forefront of education in this country for the last 62 years. As we move to our new state-of-the-art building in 2022, we look forward to continuing to bring innovation and compassion to the kingdom for years to come. It has also been my privilege to see the developments in the infrastructure and technology in Saudi Arabia over the last 16 years. I'm so proud to be leading this school into the future in partnership with our host country of Saudi Arabia, right here, right now. The last 2 years will be remembered as one of the most unusual and uniquely challenging times for schools around the world. Due to COVID-19, students and parents have had to rapidly adapt to challenging conditions in a way not known for generations. It's also unlikely that in the history of humanity, a profession such as ours has had to radically change the way it operates and dramatically upskill in such a short space of time. Our teachers have risen to the challenge, and their tireless professionalism creates a robust virtual school model, which is among the best in the world. Our students have demonstrated their learner agency and continue to strive for excellence in their new learning environments. And our parents, supportive of both students and teachers, with compassion, forming the backbone which allowed this model to take shape and become highly acceptable, highly professional. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.
Thank you for the wonderful session and information, Mr. Bolton. I'm just going to check for some questions online. Just give me a minute.
Okay.
I'm going to post it on the chat for you.
Okay, I have a question here. Would dependency on learning through digitalization reduce post-COVID if COVID-free world is a reality? But I think my answer to that question, I think I've tried to refer to in my my talk, is that we've learned so much from the digitalization in the virtual world that we need to make sure that we're still catering for that after we come back into the physical world. Please let that happen as soon as we possibly can. There are lessons to be learned in everything that we did. And the most important people that we need to be listening to as educators are our students. We have our students telling us that they're now telling us that they want us to teach in this particular way. We're looking at changing timetables, scheduling, things in line with how best to develop them for the future based on our experiences of the physical world as well as the virtual world. There's a question here about, do you think digitalization will have an impact on kids' interpersonal skills and social skills? And if yes, how do we overcome this hurdle? That's an absolutely brilliant question. I referenced the social and emotional learning. It's really we've got to note that the technology, the digitalization has really supported the learning really well. But one thing that has happened is in terms of social development of our students, it's very, very noticeable that there's a change in that, in how people, relationships, how people are behaving with one another, how they, if they get a chance to come back into the physical classroom, how they are as they were before 2 years previously. As educators here in Saudi Arabia, as I'm sure in the rest of the world, we have to take into account, for example, that maybe a student who was in year 4 when we began virtual school is now in year 6. There's a whole year that they've missed the social necessities that comes with that year group. So we really need to make sure that we're concentrating on this. One thing that we did put into place when we had virtual school was that we would have a screen-free day. So we insisted that our students did not refer to a screen at all, and that they worked on stuff in the background that they needed to do to make sure that they were enhancing their learning. So that's another excellent question. I hope I managed to answer it. Yeah, there's another great question here. In the current situation, schools need to be agile in their approach and response. How can schools make sure acting fast should not mean that the fundamentals of strategic planning are forgotten? We're actually working on a strategic plan for the whole of the International Schools Group at the moment. We have 5 schools within the organization, and we're looking to try and develop the cohesion and the consistency between the schools. And we've got to make sure that we take on board the things that we know, but try not to act too fast in what we're trying to change, because change takes time. As we all know, we want to make any sort of change, it needs to develop over a longer period of time. So I would suggest my answer to that question is that we're thoughtful. We give time to decisions that need to be made, and we don't just suddenly jump headfirst into a new experience without proper supportive data and knowledge that we gain from things such as surveys. Yeah, there's some very thoughtful questions in this presentation. Indeed, the educational shift has been tremendously amazing. However, what about students who require differentiation? I have to be honest and say that that's been real. I don't think it's been just a challenge for our school. I think it's probably been a challenge for every school that's gone through the COVID pandemic and had to enter into the virtual world. One of the things we really used to appeal to our government relations office was to see if we could, even when we had to be totally virtual for the full 5 days of the week, we were asking, could we just bring small support groups, 3 or 4 children in, because we needed to identify the needs of those children who needed extra support. And what we did notice in the virtual world is that the children who needed the extra support, those who required one-to-one work, or those who required small group work, who required extra help with maths, would be amongst some of the first children that would begin to switch off from virtual school. So we used our virtual platform to sort of identify those small groups of children that we could give them one-to-one support online, as well as within the whole virtual classroom experience. So, but now that we've started to get children back in physically, they become our top priority to make sure that we fill the gaps that lots of the children will have gaps in their learning. That's the unfortunate nature of the experience. But those with the most gaps, we're really targeting them as they come back into school at this moment. Yeah, there's a similar sort of question here. I think I've probably got 30 seconds more to answer this question. But how have your teachers successfully addressed any gaps in learning which may have arisen through not physically being in school? I hope I've sort of given an answer to that based on how I answered the previous question, in that, the teachers are very aware. Well, one of the things we work on here in the British School of Dharan is that relationship between the student and the teacher, that it's not that they know them personally, that they really know what makes them tick and what makes them move forward. So our teachers are right on board with the students now, identifying those areas that they need development in, and trying to target them to the best of their ability. It's not just our school; it's the entire population, I'm sure, of the educational world is being faced with that challenge of a year 5 student that's now in year 7. How do we bridge that gap between the 5 and the 7, the period of time they missed socially and emotionally, as well as the content within the curriculum? And I would say probably bordering on the biggest challenge we have in education at this moment in time.
Thank you, David. David, we have a few more minutes and we have a few more questions because questions are pouring in.
Right.
I can give you a couple of more minutes so that we can answer these questions. Can I post a couple of more questions for you?
Yes, I'm trying to keep up with them. They post very quickly, and
yeah, could you elaborate more how you develop innovation and creativity using e-learning platform? That was one of the questions being asked.
So we've got the using the e-learning platforms. The most basic one, of course, Google Classroom was the simplest one. That was our simplest tool to use with students, and it allowed us to be able to have that open dialogue between them, so that we could keep up to date with where they were, how they were doing. They could have our students often used Google Classroom to be able to. They would say at the end of a set, what we did with our teachers, we would have the teachers doing an online lesson, and then after the lesson, the teachers would be available, make themselves available for students to ask for extra support if they needed. And we found Google Classroom to be a really, really great tool to be able to work that, because it's very, very user-friendly. And each of our students has a student code for every subject in the curriculum. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're having to do it with the class teacher. They can be working with the physical education teacher, the art teacher, the design technology teacher, and so on. The other ones, things like the Ed Puzzle and the other ones that we were using, we developed by experimentation. Really, we've got a really great learning office here that supports the education of our students, and it also supports the schools in how we deliver things. And when we were on virtual school, they would be doing research for us into suitable tools that we could use, and then we would recommend them, and then we would experiment with them, and then teachers would feed back to one another about tools that were being used and could be used effectively. So thinking on your feet throughout virtual school was the most positive thing that we did. Last question. The teachers and educators have adapted and adopted the new norm of virtual learning. I am concerned about the behaviour and attitude of teachers, which is not going to be same as Victorian style. Okay, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure what is meant by that. I think is the person that's asking this question, are you saying that the teachers are still teaching in a Victorian style? So the model of education that we teach, the structure of the day, the way it works, was based in the 1800s, and it hasn't really changed over the course of time. There's a fantastic YouTube presentation of how you can find it online very, very easily, of how the city of London has developed since the 1800s, and how teaching has developed since the 1800s. And it shows the development of the city, and it shows the development of the classroom. On one side of the screen, London is developing into an unbelievable metropolis, and in the other side of the screen, the children are still sat in desks and classrooms, and the classrooms still look like the same in the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s. So that model was based on providing children with an education that was going to give them a job for life. Now we've got to change that model. We've got to change how that works, because our students are completely different people. So our teachers, I'd like to think our teachers are moving out of the Victorian style of teaching. What we've also got to change is the scheduling and the structure of education. It's that the whole model needs to change with this new generation of students that we have. I've been in this profession for 35 years, and I'm still I'm changing. I want to continue to change. With the day we give up to the desire to change how we teach students and to match their needs, not the needs of us as adults, is the day that we need to move on from this profession. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. David. That was very informative, and thank you for answering those questions. It was a wonderful session.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for the offer. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk.
Thank you.
Such an enlightening session. We all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being with us today.